Assalamu alaikum. This is Muhammad Ishtiyaq, lecturer in English, Department of English, Kust. A warm welcome to the course of psycholinguistics, lecture number 10. Today the topic of discussion is contrastive analysis, and it would include like a definition of the term of the topic, what is contrastive analysis, in its explanation, the historical background of the topic, how did it originate, who are the first to come up with contrastive analysis hypothesis, by whom was it for the first time introduced, when was it introduced, things like that will be covered in the background section. The third aspect to be covered is implications for teaching and learning. As far as implication for teaching and learning is concerned, psycholinguistics belongs to the applied branch of linguistics. That's why teaching and learning implication for every topic of psycholinguistics is very significant. Otherwise, psycholinguistics is of no use because it's not theoretical subject. Rather, it has application for teaching and learning. That's why normally and generally every topic, if not all topic, almost all major topics have implications for language in teaching process. Next to be covered is major claim of contrastive analysis hypothesis and its criticism. One of its major claim is followed by its shortcoming or severe criticism. We will discuss it in detail. As you can say, the very crux of the topic. And next is transfer theory in contrastive analysis by Robert Lado. Finally, we will come to examples of language typologies. Means how we contrast and compare languages, and on the basis of them we can group them into different types. For instance, languages with similar characteristics are grouped in the same class, whereas languages showing different characteristics, they are classed in different groups. Let's move to the first slide. Definition, its explanation. However, before coming to the actual definition of contrastive analysis hypothesis, let's have an overview of its origin. Since psycholinguistics is a combination of two things, psychology plus linguistics, so as far as linguistic aspect of contrastive analysis is concerned, it belongs to structuralist tradition of linguistics, and as far as its psychological orientation is concerned, it belongs to behavioral psychology. Since we have different branches of psychology, clinical psychology, cognitive psychology, behavioral psychology, contrastive analysis belongs to behaviorist psychology. And similarly, we have different branches of linguistics: computational linguistics, sociolinguistics, functionalist linguistics, structuralist linguistics. Contrastive analysis belongs to structuralist linguistics. Now, what is structuralist linguistics? Let's have a short overview of it. Structuralist linguistics basically view language as a rule-governed system which could be separated into hierarchically arranged subsystems. By hierarchically arranged subsystem means that they begin with the lowest level in the hierarchy and they just go up to the topmost level. So the lowest level is actually starts from sound system, means phonology, followed by the combination of sounds, and then the combination of sounds results into syllables combination into words, into morphemes, morpheme combination into words into phrases into sentences, and then ultimately it generates meanings, intended meaning, then finally it makes a discourse. So it starts with sound system, means phonology, then morpheme system, morphology, and then word system, lexical items, lexicon, and then the combination of words into sentences known as syntactic system. However, as far as structural linguistics is concerned, you should note that it actually is focused basically on three major areas: phonology, morphology, and syntax. The lexicon, it received very scant attention from structuralists, and the discourse level was quite ignored. In fact, meanings, semantics, intended meanings, pragmatics, and discourse level, it is not actually of concern to the structuralists. They actually cope best with the closed finite linguistic system, and they deliberately excluded semantics from its description. And this is what is behaviorist psychology. We've already discussed this in detail in our first classes, since we took a start with behaviorism. Still, let's have a very brief overview of what behaviorism or behavioral psychology. Behavioral psychology and other separate influence in language teaching, particularly on audiolingual method of language teaching, and especially in the United States. Behaviorism is a general theory of language in which views language as habit formation brought about by repeated pattern of stimulus response and reinforcement. Very much clear. We have already discussed this in detail. Now let's move to the actual definition of contrastive analysis hypothesis. What is it? So what is contrastive analysis hypothesis? Let's have a discussion of that, its definition. Contrastive analysis hypothesis refers to the systematic study of a pair of languages in order to identify their structural differences and similarities, usually for the purpose of translation and language teaching. So look at the definition. It has got highlighted words, phrases. The very basic things about contrastive analysis: it's a systematic study, it's not random. So what is meant by systematic study, it will get clear in the coming slides. By systematic, we means that it has got a procedure, it has got a technique, it has got a system, a methodology. You cannot do it anyway. You must go by a proper system, by a proper mechanism. Otherwise, it will be lacking this systematic aspect. Rather, it will become random, and random things are not actually, you can say, very much up to the mark, or maybe considered as systematic. Next important thing in the definition is a pair of languages. I mean, it must be between two languages. The two languages can be compared with respect to different aspects. For instance, their phonological system, their morphological setup, their syntactic pattern, and as far as meanings concerned, it's not included in contrastive analysis systems. So we can compare sounds of two languages, we can compare words of two languages, we can compare sentence pattern of two languages, we can compare morphemes of two languages, and it will give us clue what are the similarities and what are the differences. So the purpose is to identify the structural differences and similarities. By structural differences, similarity means differences in the forms of sounds, in the forms of words, in the forms of syntactic patterns, like that. And basically, contrastive analysis is actually motivated for the purpose of translation and language teaching. What's meant by translation? We will discuss it in detail. This means its implication for translation, as far as its implication for language teaching is concerned. The coming slide will make it clear. It also be noted that historically contrastive analysis was used to establish language genealogies, language families, by comparing the structural differences, similarities of two languages or more than two languages. They would actually come to the conclusion that whether this language belongs to a particular region, particular geography, a particular language family, and things like that. However, its recent application is not basically to establish language genealogies. Rather, its implication has more to do with translation and language teaching. So, historical background of contrastive analysis hypothesis. Who did originate it? When did originate? So we are coming to historical background. The theoretical foundation of the contrastive analysis hypothesis were formulated in Robert Ledder's Linguistics Across Cultures. This was the famous book of Robert Ledder's 1957, which actually started the tradition of contrastive analysis hypothesis. However, what Ledder put forward in his book Linguistics Across the Culture was not followed in letters with letter and spirit. How, for instance, you should note that it was not actually linguistics across, you can say, structure. It was linguistics across cultures. Ledder himself was an English and Spanish bilingual, born in America of Spanish parents, but he grew up in Spain and then went to the college in the USA. He was well aware of the importance of cultural differences in mastering a foreign language. However, his appeal to compare culture was not taken up, and in practice contrastive analysis focused on a surface comparison of languages, starting with the sound, then the grammar, and finally only selectively the vocabulary. So let's have an important element of Ledder's theory to be focused on. His appeal was to compare the culture, not simply linguistic structure, but contrastive analysis hypothesis. It actually overlooked the element of culture and it only focused on the surface structures, beginning with sounds, beginnings with moving to words in grammar, and selectively with the vocabulary. However, his purpose was not only simple comparison structure, rather his purpose was to have this important elements of culture to be focused on. Unfortunately, it was not taken up. Next, we should move to important elements. His books, Ledder claimed that those elements which are similar to the learner's native language will be simple for him, and those elements that are different will be difficult. It's very simple. For instance, look at the highlighted element. Elements which are similar will be simple. Elements which are different will be difficult. So we may say that the main idea of contrastive analysis as propounded by Robert Ledder in his book Linguistics Across Culture in 1957 was that it is possible to identify the areas of difficulty a particular foreign language will present for native speakers of another language by systematically comparing the two languages, not randomly comparing the two things. So his purpose was systematically comparing the two languages and cultures, but contrastive analysis only focuses on the world's first element languages, and in languages it's only surface structures, not semantic components. So we may say where the two languages in cultures are similar, learning difficulties will not be expected, or it will be quite less. And where they are different, then learning difficulties are to be expected. And we may simply summarize it: the greater the differences, the greater the degree of expected difficulty, and the lesser the differences, the lesser, you may say, the difficulty for the foreign or second language learners. So on the basis of such analysis, it was also believed that teaching material could be tailored to the needs of learner of a specific first language. So it's one of the implications that teaching materials could be tailored on the basis of such analysis. It can give us clue what are the problem area and where there will be no problems. So let's move ahead. As far as its purpose is concerned, finally it's for tailoring teaching material. It should be noted that contrastive analysis hypothesis, it was not a novel suggestion, but Ledder was the first to provide a comprehensive theoretical treatment and to suggest a systematic set of technical procedure for the contrastive study of languages. Again, you should look at it was not a novel suggestion. Novel suggestion means it was not something new that led that you should compare languages. It will make you know the differences and similarities. What was important, it was not its newness, rather it was its comprehensive theoretical treatment. For a long time there was no principled approach to language teaching based on error, based on differences and similarities. It was Robert Ledoux who came up with this thing for the first time, who provided us a comprehensive, thorough, complete theoretical treatment of the matter, and finally it also suggested a systematic set of technical procedures. So means he was not only providing us with comprehensive theoretical treatment, but also practical and systematic set of technical procedure. What is the systematic set of technical procedure? We may say it involves selecting languages, describing the languages using structuralist linguistics. Keep in mind that we should describe the languages using structuralist tradition, already discussed in the first slide. Then comparing the two languages, then predicting learning difficulties of the two languages, and finally verifying them. So look at it. The systematic process involves selection, the first process, description is the second process, and comparing is third process, predicting is the fourth process, and finally verification is the fifth element, the fifth technical procedure to be carried out. So we may say that things in contrastive analysis are not random. It systematically proceeds from selection to descriptions using structural element, structural criteria, and then comparison, prediction, and finally verification of them. So next is actually the next slide. It will include teaching and learning applications. In the last topic, I have given you people the task that students are supposed to know the learning teaching application. This time I'm going to provide you the teaching learning application, but students are supposed to elaborate it by themselves. What can be the possible teaching application further besides those I have mentioned, and how contrastive analysis is relevant for these language learning application. So it was expected that once the areas of potential difficulties had been mapped out. So this word is important, potential difficulties. Remember that potential difficulties means that difficulties which are not quite clear, which can pose problems which are not explicit. So the purpose of contrastive analysis is to come up with potential, mean implicit, which can be possible. Possible difficulties is mapped out through contrastive analysis. It would be possible to design language courses, means in curriculum, more efficiently. Next also, we noted that it's not only designing of language course, not in curriculum, but it also has its implication in language teachers' education, means second language teacher education, generally a foreign language teacher education, and it also has its role in language teaching methodology. For instance, a particular language teaching methodology known as audiolingual method, it is actually the result of contrastive analysis. We know that contrastive analysis is strongly influenced by behaviorism and strongly influenced by structuralism. It's actually exerted profound effects on second language acquisition, SLME, second language acquisition curriculum design, language teacher education, language teaching methodology. Actually, major claim of contrastive analysis hypothesis, very important things to be covered in this section is, in the strongest population, the contrastive analysis hypothesis claimed that all the errors made in learning the L2 could be attributed to interference by the L1. So look at one of the major claims of contrastive analysis hypothesis is that not some errors, all the errors and all the errors made where learning of L2 or learning of, you can say, foreign language, they could be attributed to the interference by L1. This is a very, you can say, sweeping comment, we may say. So next we may say, look at, however, this claim could not be sustained by empirical evidence that was accumulated in the mid and late 1970s. Which claim? The claim that all the errors in learning of L2 is actually they are caused by interference L1, first language. By L1 we mean first language, a mother tongue, a native language. They say we have actually got the major claim of a hypothesis in criticism. The major claim is that all the errors are made or can be attributed to the interference of L1, but this claim could not be sustained by empirical evidence that was accumulated in the mid-19. What were the empirical evidence that 1970s and 80s? It was soon pointed out many errors predicted by contrastive analysis were not observed in true learner's language. So one thing to be noted, that contrastive analysis, one of the procedure was prediction of error. Contrastive analysis, it predicted many errors, but the errors were not observed in actual process of learning L2. And next, even more confusingly, some uniform errors were made by learners irrespective of their one. So one of the major claims was that all the errors are actually caused by L1 interference, but have come speakers from 3 different languages having different L1, they commit the same uniform errors. So this means that not all the errors can be attributed to the process or the interference of L1, rather we have intralingual errors as well beside interlingual error. So we may say that the acquisition of English sentence negation, all learners, regardless of language background, go to the same stages. And at an early stage, all the learners will use pre-verbal negation. For example, whatever is your native language, if you are learning English as a second language, foreign language, your structure will be your structure of English to make it negative will be without helping. Well, for instance, at the early stage, people don't say I don't understand. They say no understand. Later, whether you're Spanish, you are Italian, you're Urdu speaker, you're Pashto speaker, whosoever you are, whatsoever is your native language, you will use no understand rather than don't understand. So even those languages whose language, those speakers whose native language has pre-verbal negation, they are likely to persist with pre-verbal negation longer than German learners or other languages whose languages does not have it. So at a later stage of development, all learners will tend to place the negative after the auxiliary. So instead of saying no understand, they will say do not understand or don't understand. However, so we may say that the influence of L1 is not completely and wholly responsible for all the errors. Rather, we may say that it may be important in explaining some of the errors, predicting some difficulties, and explanation of the errors, but we cannot say that it can be, if we may say that, made responsible for all the errors. Transfer theory in contrastive analysis by Robert Leto. Not that much difficult things it has got. It's very simple. For instance, depending on the similarities and differences between the structure of the learner's native language and that of the target language, we have 2 kinds of transfer. Positive transfer occurs when L1 is similar to L2. It's very, very much similar if 2 languages have got similar structure, similar rules of combinations, rules of production, rules of attachment. They will have definitely have advantages. It facilitates learning of L2. and negative transfer happen when L1 is different from L2. Means if structures, rules of combination, rules of production, rules of meaning, or rules in different systems of the language, phonological systems, morphological system, syntactic system, if they are different and they transfer the different rules to the learning of L2 process, definitely it will pose problems for the learning of L2, and it will cause its negative interference. So instead of facilitating learning, it poses further problems. Next comes the topic of, you can say, the aspect in this is the individual tend to transfer the forms, meanings, and the distribution of forms and meanings of their native language, native language and culture to the foreign language and culture, both productively when attempting to speak a language and deceptively when attempting to grasp and understand language. So the forms from every system, from phonological, morphological, syntactic system, meanings derived from these forms. In the distribution of forms, the distribution means placement of form. For instance, by distribution we means certain languages have got pre-modifications, others have got post-modification. There are languages they tend to use prefixes and suffixes, but no infixes. But we have languages that use infixes as well, and there are languages that use both prefixes and suffixes simultaneously, known as circumfixes. So it depends on different placement of the element. Languages they tend to begin with subject, other languages tend to begin with object, yet there are languages that tend to begin with verb, normal syntactic pattern. So different distribution means different placement of the forms in different slots in a sentence or words. So we may say they are using the forms, meaning, in distribution of forms, meaning of their native language. Mean the forms of native language, the placement of the elements in different slots of the native language, the meanings of the native language, they are actually imported. They are actually applied productively when they speak the language, when they write the language. Both are productive processes, as well as receptively when they attempt to know the language. Whenever they are reading, grasping means knowing deeply and trying to understand language. Whether they are reading the written script, whether they are listening to the spoken version of something. In both cases, they tend to transfer the techniques, the procedures, the methods, the strategies of their native language. So if the strategies, procedures, techniques related to the forms, meanings, distribution of forms and meaning, they tend to be similar, there will be positive interference, and if they tend to be different, there will be negative interference. The final slide, very important one. So we need to have a focus on it. Let me have it. So look at the examples of language typologies at various levels. How we establish language typologies? We establish language typologies on the basis of contrastive analysis. We compare phonological system, and if phonological systems of two languages matches, they will belong to one group. Similarly, we make a language typology on the basis of morphological system, on the basis of lexical system, on the basis of syntactic system, on the basis of semantic systems, on the basis of pragmatic values. So let's start with phonological. For instance, if two languages have got similar patterns with respect to stress time, with respect to morphemes, with respect to aspiration, and they will tend to be very easy to learn. For instance, Arabic and English use two different sets of morphemes. There will be quite differences in their pronunciation. Arabic speakers pronounce the word park as bark. Why? Since Arabic phonology does not have the phoneme per, they replace the phoneme per with b. Same as the case with other languages. It may be the case with English as well. If English does not have a particular phoneme, it may not pronounce it. It will replace it with another. For instance, There are phonemes in Arabic language, Urdu language, Pashto language, which are not part of English phonology. So English may not realize those phonemes and replace it with another similar, or you can say nearby phoneme, if not exactly different phoneme. Same is the case with other words, like in English, the word use has two pronunciation. If it is a noun, we don't pronounce it as use, rather we call it use. If the word use is used as a verb, only then we can call it use. For instance, we can't say the use of noun is wrong, because here it's not used as a verb, rather it is used as a noun, so we must say use of noun. Similarly, language use is wrong in English. We must say language use. The word close is a verb, is close is an adjective, and as a noun is close. There are many other pairs of words. Their pronunciation, if they are used as a noun, will be one. If they are used as verb, they will be quite different. For instance, abuse in abuse, but this phenomena may not be necessarily part of the phonological system of other languages, so there will be differences. Similarly, we don't have aspiration in Urdu, in English, in Pashto, but we have aspiration in English, like we say person, which is wrong, but English speakers would say person rather than person. We say park, but they say park. So there is visible inspiration. Similarly, we have stress pattern, we have aspiration pattern, we have phoneme pattern different in English. So phonologically, languages can be divided into three groups: stress-timed languages, syllable-timed languages, and tone-timed languages. English belongs to the typology of stress-timed language, because in it stress occurs at regular interval. Urdu belongs to syllable-timed language, and Chinese belong to the tone-timed languages. These have got different phonological characteristics. That's why they have speakers of Urdu, Chinese, and English. They have problems while learning L2 as far as their phonological components are concerned. The word component is generally mispronounced as component, but its exact pronunciation is component. Similarly, we can also divide languages on morphological basis. Morphologically, we have isolating languages, we have fusional languages, and we have agglutinated languages. English is a mixed stuff. In some cases, it belongs to isolating. The morphological division of languages into isolating, fusional, and agglutinating languages. It has got this rules like phonological division. Isolating languages tend to have one morpheme per word. Agglutinating languages tends to have as many as possible morphemes per word. Fusional languages diffuse 2 or 3 morphemes in the single word or single morpheme. For instance, in English, the word she, it has got fusional element, fusional quality, because it's singular, as well as plural. The word she has fused inside its structure. In this structure, the morpheme s. Generally, if we make plural, English singular word plural, we tend to add s or es, or in some cases other word, but the word she, without incorporating s, it is also plural, so it's fusional qualities. Similarly, we have other things, other criteria we can also come up with is for morphological division, but mainly we have 3: isolating criterion, fusional criterion, and agglutinative criterion. Turkish is an agglutinative language. English is a mix sort of, with predominant tendency of isolating, whereas Chinese is a fusional language morphologically. As far as lexical difference is concerned, we can come to the criteria of number of syllables per words. There are languages in which we have number of syllables per words many more than other languages. We can also have differences in their affixes. For instance, affixes include 4 things: prefixes, suffixes, infixes, circumfixes, and in some cases supraffixes as well. So English tend to use generally prefixes and suffixes. In very rare cases, it uses infixes, but there are languages that use both prefixes and suffixes, infixes. There are also languages that use circumfixes. So prefix and suffix are not the only elements to be added to words. We can also include something inside it. Prefix at the beginning, suffix at the end, infix in the middle, circumfix beginning and end of the adding elements, the beginning at the and the end simultaneously at the same time. So languages that use circumfixes and infixes, prefixes, they tend to differ from English. One more thing, suprafix. Suprafix is not an element to be added in written form. Rather, it's actually tone, it's actually pitch differences. For instance, tone time languages, they don't use prefixes or suffixes or infixes or circumfixes. Chinese is a tone time language. It uses suprafixes. For instance, in English, if we want to make plural the word book, we should add the word s, means we add a suffix. We change it into books. Similarly, if we want to make a word negative, for instance, we use the word tie with the help of prefix un, we can make it untie. But in Chinese, a tone time language, things are not like that. For making things plural, for making things negative, and for showing other grammatical aspects in lexical item, they don't use prefixes or suffixes or infixes. Rather, they tend to use suprafixes. By suprafixes, mean they tend to lower the pitch of the word, or higher the pitch of the word, or vary the pitch of the word, which actually is an indication of its grammatical change, aspect of the grammatical change. Syntactic. Syntactic criteria includes arrangement of elements, clause elements like subject, verb, object, three basics. Adverbial and complement can also be included. So we have three different types of languages. We have subject-first languages. By subject-first languages, we mean languages which generally use subject as initial position. We have verb-first languages, languages which tend to use verb generally in the first as a first element in a sentence. Object-first languages, languages which tend to use object as first element in a sentence. So look at three different types criteria. The dog killed the duck. English is a subject verb object element. The subject, the dog is subject, killed is verb, duck is object. Similarly, Turkish is subject, subject, object verb. The dog, the duck, killed. Look at subject, object, verb. Look at Welsh, language of Wales. It's actually killed, begins with verb, followed by subject, followed by object. As far as Madagascar, this language, Malagasy of Madagascar, it begins with verb, followed by object, followed by subject. And Hexcoin, South American language, it begins with object, the duck, followed by verb, followed by subject. Another language, it actually begins with the object, the duck, followed by subject, and followed by verb. So we have different types of pattern. Now, finally, we may say those languages which has got similar syntactic pattern. For instance, a language which has got similar pattern to English, like subject, verb, object, they will be having less problem in syntactic arrangement. If we have elements like object, verb, subject, there will be huge problem of linguistic construction if they are learning English as a second language. We may conclude, for translation purpose, especially the last three, this morphological, lexical, and syntactic comparison, or syntactic typologies have got greater implication, if not phonological, because translation is generally carried out in written form. So two languages having same morphological makeup, same lexical features, same syntactic pattern will tend to have easier flow from the source language to the target language. If they have got greater differences, there will be greater problem. This is the end of lecture. If you have any problem, please feel free to contact. The email is already visible to you. You may ask any question all the time and anytime. Good luck.